9 times out of 10, you have heard about the Salem Witch Trials. And you probably think, like a lot of people do, unless, of course, you've read the factual history, you probably think that a bunch of witches got burned at the stake because they was up there messing with them Puritans, okay? But the truth is, not one, not one of those people was truly a witch. Not to say they would have deserved it if they were. I'm a priestess. I was born a witch. I've never hurt anybody. I always tell people not to hurt other people. But the point is that they weren't even guilty of the crime that many of them were put to death for. One guy, they pressed him to death. Do you know what that means? That means they laid him on his back on the ground, put a door or a long board over top of him, and put weight, bricks, rocks, cinder blocks on top of him until it crushed him to death. It took 2 days. And he wasn't even a witch. He didn't know anything about witchcraft. He was an 80-year-old man, a farmer, an old man, And I'm going to tell you why this happened. But first, hi, I'm Queen Haru, and thank you for joining me for another wonderful edition of Ask an Aquarius. If you haven't already, please hit the red subscribe button and smack the bell. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, pass it on to somebody else who might like it too, and drop us a positive comment in the comment section. And if you have time, please stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to read out 2 of my favorite comments from previous videos. And one of them may be yours. If you want to get a reading done, please email me and check underneath this video for all of my information in case you want to hit me up. Now let's get back to our tale. So I wish this was a spookier tale because, I wanted to tell spooky stories today, But this one is not as spooky as you would think. I've known about this for many, many years, but I did a lot of research over the weekend to be able to tell you guys about it. And I was just disappointed at its lack of creepiness. I was very disappointed at its lack of actual spookiness, So I'll basically tell you what happened. There was a woman. Her name is Tituba. Tituba, according to what I understand, they didn't have good records on her because she was an enslaved woman. So they didn't have good records on many people, but definitely not the enslaved people. They were seen as less than human, so they really didn't keep up real good records on them. But according to history, she could have been a Carib Indian. She could have been South American. She could have been from the Barbados or the West Indies. But basically, she was of color and she was from a different part of the world than these Puritans were. And she worked for this man who was a reverend. And his daughter and his niece started to have these fits and screamings and, wailing and acting all crazy, out of nowhere. So the Reverend had the doctor come in. The Reverend is like, these girls acting strange. I don't know what's going on with them. So the doctor came in and said the girls had been bewitched. That was his prognosis. Not epilepsy, not, I'm gonna run some more tests, maybe it's seizures. It could have been anything really, because back during that time period, they had a real problem with moldy bread. And sometimes they would eat this moldy rye, the stuff that they make the bread with, and it could cause hallucinations and things like that. So instead of thinking maybe it's, food poisoning or something like that, he concluded that they were bewitched, that their behavior was indeed caused by the devil. Puritan society believed very strongly in the devil. They believed very strongly in evil. They believed in witches. They believed that witches and the devil were real adversaries trying to destroy them. If something went wrong in the town, if the crops failed, or if a cow died, or something happened, they automatically assumed it was witchcraft. It was evil. It was the devil, you know? Couldn't have been a bad harvest, a drought, it had to be the devil. Everything was the devil, or witches, or warlocks, wizards, whatever they wanted to call them. I think they were using witches and wizards, and they had all of these really strange beliefs, just stuff that people made up. Because remember, the Salem Witch Trials happened in 1692 and 1693. They started during the time of Aquarius. They started in February, actually. And basically, they only lasted a little bit of time. But before that, Europe had what they call the burning times. And for about 200 years, witches were burned at the stake. To this day, there are still places where you can be killed, imprisoned for witchcraft, because some people still have this strong belief that everything is the devil. Not their choices, not the mistakes that they might have made, not nature, not science. It's always the devil. And as a person who believes in spirituality, I believe in that kind of stuff. I know it's not always negative. It's not always negative energy. It's not always somebody else's fault, It's case by case. So for a couple hundred years, Europe had been burning people and, calling them heretics and witches and all kinds of stuff. They had all kinds of medieval tortures. They would torture these poor people. And most of the people, even looking back in Europeans' history, most of these people were not practicing witchcraft. But let's stick directly to Salem, Massachusetts. So this whole hysteria kicked up because these two young girls. And so then it became, okay, if they're bewitched, who's the witch? So now this is where we get the term witch hunt. Because now we got to figure out who's the witch. Because back in those days, and still to this day, a lot of pagans, a lot of witches, a lot of wizards choose to work in secret. Even if they're not harming anybody, they could just be doing healing magic, but they could fear persecution. I know a lot of people who are witches and wizards and priestesses and shamans and all kinds of different walks of life who don't really talk about it because they don't want to face persecution from other people. And some of these are good people. These are people who would never hurt a fly, but because of the stigma that's around, this kind of thing, they don't tell anybody. When I first started getting into, spirituality, witchcraft, Wicca, learning more about, the Egyptian magic and things like that, I used to cover my books because I used to read my books. I used to read constantly. I would read while I was waiting for something. I would read sitting in my car. I would read during my lunch period. I was constantly reading. And I remember when I first started reading about these types of topics, I would cover the books in a book cover. When I was a kid, we had to cover our books with brown paper bags. This is going way back. So you would bring your textbooks home from school and you had to cover them in brown paper bags and write your name on it and the title of it and everything. And that's how you kept your book from getting messed up throughout the year. So when it was time to give it back at the end of the year, your mom and dad didn't have to pay for a book you've messed up. So when I first started getting into craft, I would cover my books with a book cover or brown paper, construction paper, and I would write a different title on the outside of the book so nobody knew what I was reading. Now, that didn't last long because you guys know me. I don't hide for long. I've hid a number of things in my life. I hid my sexuality. I hid about my spiritual practices. But it doesn't last long with me. I can't hide for long. It becomes so uncomfortable, luckily for me, and I end up bucking against it. Like, get off me. So there are still places where, you can be persecuted. So a lot of people are very quiet about it. So in Salem, they decided to try to find out who the witches were. So they interrogated the young girls. Now, the young girls, up until that point, had not said they were bewitched. But once they heard that, they ran with it. And I don't know if they ran with it because they were just young, because they were young. They were like 13. So I don't know if they ran with it because they were young and impressionable. I don't know if they ran with it because of the pressure from the adults, because Salem had a lot of pressure and a lot of stress going on, a lot of fights with other groups. They didn't have a lot of money, wasn't a lot of food to go around. Salem had a lot of stress. So I don't know if the girls are just going along with what the Reverend said or what, but they named 3 witches. And one of them was Tituba, the servant, the enslaved. I don't know what she was. The enslaved woman of color. Let's call her that. They blamed her, and they blamed 2 other women. One woman was homeless, and the other woman, I believe, was a widow. And when they accused them, they were arrested. They were arrested for witchcraft, and they were held. And then it became mass hysteria. People started accusing other people. It just got really crazy, and before you knew it, it was spreading to other towns, and all kinds of people were being accused of being witches. But out of the people that were accused, there is not a shred of evidence that any of these people, except Tituba, she's the only one who might. And I say that because Tituba came from a different culture. So she might have had like folk magic, She might have known things about stuff like that, because if you go to different cultures have different remedies and things like that they saw as witchcraft. If it was anything other than traditional modern medicine, it was witchcraft in their mind. So if I go mix up some herbs in a glass to make your stomach stop hurting and it stops hurting, that's witchcraft. No, it was just I knew which herbs to use, because the earth has plenty of herbs that we can use as medicine. And throughout history, many of us have been able to figure out which ones. You could pick up a book right now on herbalism and see exactly what I'm talking about. So anybody who did anything different was considered to be a witch. So Tituba might have had some old ways. We don't even know. Somebody said that she did a love spell, that she taught the girls a love spell. But not even that has been verified. Some people say that's outright not even true. So Tituba, maybe. The rest of them, probably not. And Tituba, from what I understand, was taken from her people at a young age. So it's doubtful she would have even known that much. So it spread. It spread from town to town, all up there in Massachusetts. And lots of people in Andover and other parts of Massachusetts, all around the surrounding area, were accused of witchcraft. And at first, people just went along with it, Then people started to realize that only certain people were being accused. And it wasn't all women. It was mostly women, but there were also some men who were accused. There were some older people, there were some younger people, but people started to see a pattern here. It was mostly women. It was also people who, like I said, were into anything that was different. People who were strange, people who were unusual, people who were poor. It was like the people that society deemed as not being good enough. People the Puritans did not see as being good enough. If you were poor, you weren't good enough. You're of color, you're not good enough. So those types of people are the ones who were targeted. And a lot of women who owned land. So it's like, are you killing them just to take their land? And a lot of people thought it was more economics and social status than actual witchcraft. So people think that these witches were burned. They were not burned. They were hung. And the place that they were hung It's still in Massachusetts. It's still in Salem. It's still, I forgot what they called it. They called it Proctor's Ledge, I think is what it's called. And it's still there today. You can still go. It's nothing more than just a little ledge. And it's so crazy to me because now I was looking at pictures of it online. There's a Walgreens right there now. I was like, I would not be trying to shop in that Walgreens late at night. And then 50 feet away is where these innocent people were murdered by the state. So a lot of people did die. Some people died in prison. They tortured people. There was a lot of confessing, mainly because of the way the system was. If you confessed, you got a lenient sentence. If you did not confess, you were murdered immediately. People were tortured. They had all kinds of different ways, and the stories were bizarre. That's how I was like, I can't believe y'all believe these stories. They had to be tortured to say these kind of things like the devil came to them in as a red cat and made them sign their name in his book. What? They had these weird stories about how animals were, the devil. Several animals were executed during this time because they said the animals were witches. So they killed them. They shot them. So it was wild. It was real wild. This one guy, his wife was accused. He testified against his wife. A couple weeks later, he was accused. He was the man I told you about in the beginning of this video that got pressed to death. That man testified. His name is Giles. He testified against his own wife because he got caught up in the hysteria too. He thought his wife was a witch. But then when they came and arrested him, he was like, wait a minute. Something ain't right here. He's an 80-year-old farmer, knew nothing about witchcraft. He was a very interesting story because they said that as they were pressing him to death, they asked him, did he have any last words? And he said, more weight. Very defiant. A lot of the people who were accused of witchcraft were very defiant, and they refused to say that they were into witchcraft. Now, Tituba is one of the people who confessed and gave some wild stories, about stuff that I've never heard of. She made some stuff up and they let her go. Tituba was sold and left out of Massachusetts colony. So the one person who might have known some folk magic, but we're not even sure about that, did not get murdered. And all those other people who were, for all intents and purposes, more than likely innocent, were killed. So finally, the wife of one of the judges was accused of witchcraft. And her husband said, you know what? I think we've had enough. And that was it. The whole craze was over. He banged his gavel and he was like, that's it. No more of these witch hunts. No more executions. Everybody was let free from jail. Anybody who wasn't already dead was let free. And then the Salem started a process of, trying to make up for it. I mean, it's kind of hard. You killed these people, so it's kind of hard to. But they paid retribution to their families. They had everyone who was executed, had them all declared innocent. So everybody that was executed for being witches was then said not to have been witches, and their families were paid restitution. Prayers were done. They did a bunch of different things throughout the next 200, 300 years to make up for it. Now, if you go to Salem, you'll see it's very interesting to me. I never went to Salem before, but I've seen lots and lots of documentaries on Salem. And what's interesting to me is now the town embraces witchcraft. You see the little witch hat everywhere, the cat, the broomstick, Samantha from Bewitched is like in the town square. Now they embrace it. It's like a tourist attraction now. So back then you could be, hung, oppressed to death. And now it's a place that people go for Halloween to take pictures. So I find it to be very interesting that the town has embraced they've basically embraced it at this point. So I think that's very interesting. I do want to go one day because I want to see that. But that is the story of the Salem Witch Trials. Not one real witch was murdered during that time, and all of those people were found innocent after the fact. Now, another day, I'll tell you more about the European burning times, because it's like 200 years of stories. So I would have to tell you, those stories in little pieces. But it was equally as horrific, and more than likely, those people were innocent too. So, and all throughout human history, being an outcast is something that people have used against other people. And in this case, they used it to take their land. Some people accused their enemies. If me and you had a rivalry. I remember they were talking about one young lady, and they said that she was having an affair. And if I'm not mistaken, this might have been a movie, but it was based on the kind of thing that would happen. And they said the young lady was having an affair with this man, and she accused his wife of witchcraft to get her husband. And even though that particular situation may not be factual, there are factual accounts of things like that happening. Just somebody's rival, and they accuse them of witchcraft, and now you're gone. I want your property. I accuse you of witchcraft. You get killed. I buy your property from the state. I like your wife, because some men were accused too. I like your wife. I'm going to accuse him of witchcraft, take his wife and his farm. So a lot of this was just straight up bullshit. And I just hope that those people rest in peace. Seriously. Because most of them were not, they didn't even do nothing. It's just awful. Now let's take a look at some of my favorite positive comments. I can't see good because the computer is all the way over there. You guys can tell I'm on a different angle. I had to move over so that I could plug the phone in. This one came from Tationi Bailey. She said, I agree. I notice people be secretly jealous of Aquarius, and I don't know why, honestly. I don't be doing nothing to nobody to bring anybody down. This is very true of a lot of Aquarius. Most of us mind our business, and a lot of Aquarius have that problem. That's why I did that video about Aquarius and jealousy, because I've had person after person come to me and say, what's up? Why? Why are people jealous of me? Like, what is the deal? I don't even have that much. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's not about material things, I've noticed. It's all about who you are, how you are, not so much what we have. Then let's see, the next one came from Mary L. Mary said, this always seems to be a problem when us Aquarius people, we mind our own business and still don't get it till this day. She's talking about that same video. It's like, what is with this jealousy? And honestly, I see it over and over again. It never makes sense. And I see it over and over again. That's why I tell people, don't compare yourself to other people. Just be yourself. All right, guys, it's time for me to get going. I hope you enjoyed Creep Week, and I'll be back with some more cool stuff next week. See you later.